Busy football weekend, lots going on here, lots going on in the Premier League. Dan McDonnell here in studio. Hey Dan.
Hi Joe.
Dan's going to bring us news of a good old-fashioned dust-up from Dundalk on Friday night with the audio of said dust-up, which is intriguing. You sent this to me. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm
Add a bit of sort of a natural response, yeah.
Gary Breen is going to join us on all things Premier League to surmise the Premier League weekend. We're 8 games in now. I know Alex Ferguson was fond of, well, just wait till Christmas. But in recent years, 10 games in actually is a pretty good indication of where things will be after 38 games. So where we are after 8 is that Liverpool are top by a single point, one ahead of Manchester City, a consequence of beating Chelsea 2-1 at Anfield yesterday. We are now 11 games into Arne Slot's regime, and that's 10 wins in 11. In the Premier League, that is 7 wins from 8. Been very impressive start. Arsenal 2-0 losers away to Bournemouth is the other headline news. First defeat of the season. Mikel Arteta called the situation an impossible task after William Saliba's red card, which I thought was a slightly defeatist framing of things. He was sent off after 30 minutes after holding down Evan Nielsen on halfway. It was the right decision. He did deny clear goal-scoring opportunity. Arsenal have the worst disciplinary record by far this calendar year. And it's the third time this season they've been reduced to 10 men. There was the Rice red card, very memorably, Leandro Trossard against City, and now this Saliba one. So, you know, there's just kind of a sense if Arsenal are going to do this, they would be beneficial of a lead coming into the final few games of the season. Not to let City get ahead of them, certainly. Manchester City, not for the first time already in these 8 games, salvaged things late on. John Stones, just like against Arsenal, helped by Bernardo Silva's scooch into Jose Saad, the Wolves goalkeeper. Then at Old Trafford on Saturday, Brentford in town. Thomas Frank obviously had been interviewed by the powers that be there over the summer. Gary Breen covered that game on Premier, so we'll chat to him a bit about it. First half was one of those increasingly familiar days for Manchester United. Overrun in midfield, 1-0 down at half-time. But it must be said, much, much better second half. Garnacho to the fore, 2-1 winners. There's probably still a degree of Ten Hag limping on in the atmosphere there. Spurs, 4-1 winners against West Ham, had been 1-0 down. 3 goals in 8 minutes in the second half. Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in a frenzy. That's 3 wins in 4 for Spurs. And then Aston Villa at Craven Cottage, no small thing these days to go there and win. Ollie Watkins is coming into form again, 5 league goals in 8. And then Everton, just to mention, 2-0 win at Ipswich. It was all a bit doomsday at the start of the season, but that is now 2 wins in 3 for Everton. They're unbeaten in 4, so there's some Sean Dyche steel maybe taking shape. We'll talk about some of that in a few moments' time with Dan and with Gary Breen. League of Ireland title race. 2 games to go. Strange turn of events on Friday. Teams at top of table win matches.
Yeah, it's sort of a twist on the recent theme. I think Shells and Derry were bottom of the form table as well, alongside Dundalk. But yeah, like the top 4 all won, which in most leagues is a sort of a regular weekend. Like you speak about the Premier League and why it feels a bigger deal, like why results feel a bigger deal earlier in the season is because generally like the top teams will now hit up to that 80, 90 point territory. I mean, you hear people, Arsenal losing, is this significant in the title race? Whereas obviously the league here this year has just been crazy. But on Friday, where there was like great drama sort of following the scores as they went in, but for most of the night, Derry were the only challenger winning like consistently, but then the others just all came through and won. So yeah, Shells sort of now are 2 games out, and they can almost touch it, apart from the fact that Shamrock Rovers 87th minute goal and draw that could be very significant.
Yeah. Shell's 2 points clear of Derry and Rovers. Obviously, Derry is their final game as well. So it's all beautifully set up, 2 games to go. And St. Pat's are still vaguely in the hunt. They beat Galway in that kind of eliminator type match on Friday. You were at Oriel Park. Dundalk relegated from the league. It's kind of a stunning thing when you think of the last decade. And in many respects, that of course is the bigger story. But then you have some audio here of kind of a fracas in the stands afterwards. We're going to hear Rory Higgins, Derry manager, talking to you and several other journalists. And then your mics can't help but pick up what was going on in the stands. Just in a kind of Spark Notes version, if you can, remind us of the situation at Dundalk regarding the ownership, because we're seeing current owners and former owners meeting each other in the stands after the game, and they do not like each other.
Yeah, so basically Dundalk were taken over in September by John Temple. He's a local barrister. He's a new owner. It was quite, fraught at that time. The club was maybe 24 hours from going out of business. There was an American-based owner, Breen, who was at the club for 10 months, who was sort of threatening to pull the plug because the finances wasn't there, and a deal was done to hand over to John Temple. Now, John Temple was nearly took over the club last year from a group that included Andy Connolly, a former owner, who was also the owner back in the Stephen Kenny glory days before the Peak Six, the American equity firm, came in. But long story short, Andy Connolly and this local tech firm, StatSports, they sold the club or handed the club over to Brian Ainscough last year. And through all the issues this year, the question is, what legacy issues have been, why did the club go from where they were to where they are now? There's a massive local blame game going on. John Temple has come in and clearly, there's cutbacks coming, there's financial things ongoing, and there's a massive sense of, well, who's to blame? Is it the owner this year? Is it the owners last year? What's going on? And I guess it's a community club still in some ways. It's still a smallish town, and at this game on Friday, I suppose a lot of people were there.
So John Temple, local barrister, is the owner now. Brian Ainscough is the owner of the last 10 months, the American, and before that it was Andy Connolly. Who meets in the stand here?
So what happens is that, and we'll hear it now, like Murray Higgins is doing a standard sort of post-match interview, and we hear voices in the background, and it basically ends up being a dispute between John Temple on one side and a group that includes Andy Connolly on the other side. Okay,
so let's have a listen then, and we'll leave your mic up, Dan. You can explain at any point if you need to what's going on. So we have John Temple, barrister, current owner. We have Andy Connolly, previous owner, and his entourage, who sold to Brian Ainscough. So this is Rory Higgins, dairy manager, minding his own business, talking to the journalists.
Actually, on Friday night against Bohemians, we played well for large periods of the game, created a lot of chances, should have won the game, but I don't know where I was there, Dan. Rattling some.
Just say played well on Friday. Monday was.
Played really well Friday for large periods. Should have won the game. And
sums up this club, to be honest. Is the owner involved in that?
Huh?
Where's Temple up there?
What? That's Temple up there.
That's Temple.
I'm not sure if he's involved or if he's trying to.
So we're trying to figure out what's happening as Rory Higgins is looking into the stand. He's a former Dundalk player and coach as well, so he recognises people that are involved in this.
Oh, that's the new owner.
That's the fucking new owner. Andy Connolly. Oh, Jesus Christ.
So they're being dragged apart at this stage. So Temple was sort of being moved away from the area where the Connollys were.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
That was me commenting when Temple then got hit by a dig by someone on the way out of the stand, a sort of a separate person. So as he was being taken away, someone came running down the steps
and punched him.
And punched him
in the face.
Yeah, he took it. He was struck. Yeah. So that was, and
to be very clear, not by Andy Connolly.
No. Like
a third party getting involved.
Yeah, no. As you said, I know you mentioned entourage earlier on, and I think there definitely was an element of that to it, and you have to be obviously careful with that. We'll see where that goes. Yeah. But just to explain, that's as it went along, you're sort of thinking we all broke away from chatting to Rory Higgins and sort of went walking down to see what's actually happening here. And I know some people will say. And I actually got sort of someone come up and tackle me afterwards about it, saying, "Look, why are you watching this? Why are you reporting on this?" And it's like, I said to them, if this happens, I'm sure disturbances happen all the time in all football clubs everywhere. Generally, it's in a private place. You know, rows happen all the time. You hear about it afterwards. I mean, there was a lot of people there. Like, you have all the media on the pitch. You have Derry City players. You have a few kids there, you know, kicking the ball around on the pitch after. And everyone's just looking up at the stand going, what is actually happening here? And as I said, sometimes you see discussions involving people or whatever, but you realise that these are like prominent players in the whole situation around the club, and it's not massively encouraging for people. It's almost like there's a lot of domestic issues around what's happened in Dundalk. There's a real sadness around what's happened there, and it almost feels fitting in a way on the night that they're relegated that you have this complete dysfunction playing out, even the lack of self-awareness, I think, from all concerned, that this would happen in such a public place and a public setting. And I don't have any, I think unfortunately people will take issue with it, but like you couldn't just bury your head in the sand and not report on that. Like, this is something that happened in a very public way. Emotions
are running high. And just the last one, it was hard to tell from the audio if there's two, broadly speaking, sides here in John Temple and Andy Connolly. How many people are also involved?
Oh, like there's sort of there was sort of 8 to 10 people around. Now, it does seem like it did start inside, and there may have been a point where someone was in a headlock inside as well. And I said, you have to be careful with the telling of this story here, because we don't know where it's going to go. And John Temple hasn't said very much in general. That might change this week, maybe. And like, there's obviously various, there's claim and counterclaim around a lot of what's happened there behind the scenes. But just to say, like, and as you said at the start of the piece, like, this club in the last 10 years has won 5 league titles. It's qualified for the group stages of Europe twice, 3 FAI Cups. At the start of that 10 years, they were having bucket collections for the club because they were broke. They've gone into this sort of weird sort of like incredible decade of unprecedented success, and yet they've ended it with nothing almost, with crippling debts. No one knows where they're going. And you have this really unedifying spectacle, like this unedifying spectacle here.
I would say crucially as well, the money that was earned in those European ties, where's all that gone?
Well, look, there's a big question around that. I mean, there's no doubt that a lot of people around the club, you know, and players and representatives and people, you know, would have made good money from that time, but no foundations were laid down. But there's a real blame game ongoing here now. And unfortunately, partially, I almost think that they just need a complete reset, and they need to sort of move away from their history and all these personalities and camps and factions. But I just couldn't believe what we were seeing there on Friday. Like, it's very rare that you sometimes write about these things to portray what's going on behind the scenes and the factions and the disturbances. It's very rare that it plays itself out in such a public way.
Okay. So to Premier League, Gary Breen is on the way. Liverpool 2-1 winners against Chelsea. Thought both managers were reasonably happy post-match. Chelsea are good, you know.
They are, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Like, it's almost annoying that they're going to be good. I've mentioned this before. After all their spending, but yeah, you look at the age profile of their team, and sometimes some of the mistakes they make is just they're just a bit young. Like, even when they get the excitement of the equaliser, and then Curtis Jones, this unchecked run into the box. It's actually a terrible goal to concede, really. But it does feel like they're knocking on the door. Like, Cole Palmer's exceptional. Didn't have one of his better days, really. Like, if he was as clinical as he normally is, you're probably talking a different result.
Yeah, I think so. So Liverpool's first even was against the run of play. Chelsea had the better of it for the first half hour, and then I think, to your point, once they got that second, Liverpool managed the game very, very well. You could see the experience and the assuredness that comes from a bunch who've won trophies together. 2 midfielders, obviously. One midfielder stealing the headline. And also, I just want to write a love letter to another midfielder if I can. But Curtis Jones was really excellent. And pre-game, there was a question mark over Liverpool's midfield. Not a glaring one, but just a question mark in the sense that Gravenberch has made a great start to the season in what is effectively a new role. But, you know, how tested was he against big Premier League teams? Milan away was good for sure. But, you know, it was a small question mark. Let's see how he goes against Chelsea and then Arsenal. And Szoboszlai obviously fine. But then McAllister was unwell across international duty, and so he couldn't play. So there was kind of can Jones come in and just minimise any disruption? And he did more than that. I mean, his goal, I appreciate the unchecked run aspect, but to make the run from deep was really, really good, and the touch had to be good. I mean, you've momentum when you make a run like that. Again,
And the keeper is stuck to
He
us.
is
The
stuck.
keeper has been a problem.
he has been a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and Jackson's perfectly good squad player, but goalkeeper and striker, if they are elevated to world class level, then Chelsea probably really do. have a team.
I think Jackson has potential. I do think he's got a chance.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I'm having a second in command to my world class striker.
Yeah, maybe.
This is, we're spending billions here.
And the only thing is, I'd say the keeper is possibly a little bit spooked by his earlier, even though he got away with it, the penalty incident, that he's possibly been a little bit like, okay, I'll be cautious here.
Quite possibly. But from Jones's point of view, it's a good goal, a very good goal. He won the penalty as well, which Salah scored. And again, similarly to his goal, what was so impressive, in a way that Manchester United's midfield has no energy and no legs, Jones has all of that. And he is running beyond, even though he's kind of, I guess, a quasi six alongside Gravenberch, he's running beyond Chelsea's back four routinely. And that is the mark of someone a little bit special. Steven Gerrard at his best, that was one of his real assets. Very few midfielders could do it with his kind of power, I suppose. Now, Jones isn't in that league, but that quality is a really good one for a midfielder to have. He made a goal-saving block on Cole Palmer, open goal, he's there. And he actually won the ball to set up the Gakpo goal as well, which was deemed offside. So I mean, it was a really brilliant performance. And on top of all that, here he is on Sky Sports speaking after the game, where he's asked about winning the penalty. He's also just a lovely, charming, impossible not to like young man.
Yeah, was that the one when it was an actual penalty?
The actual penalty.
Yeah. I remember I played the ball and then I made a run and then it hit me back and it was just there. So
Feel pretty clear to you?
I mean, I never dive.
I'm not suggesting you do.
I felt it contact and stuff, so I went down. It was a penalty, yeah.
Okay, so then you burst into the box. Chelsea have just equalised a couple of minutes later. First touch, you just think it's getting away from you, and then you just get that a little bit of your right foot on it.
Yeah, there's been times, when I've arrived in the box, it's always been a first time one. As soon as Mo had the ball, I've made the run and I thought it was going to come and it did. But it kind of bounced as well, so I thought I've got to have a touch, it's got to be perfect touch. And I was fortunate enough, it was in my path and I got the goal.
And I see from the celebrations that congratulations.
Thank you very much.
What, you've been a dad a week now?
I had a week, yeah, it's the best thing ever, man. I'm playing with a smile on my face. That's, it's a different type of joy. And my little girl will be proud as well, so I hope that my girlfriend at home and the baby are there with a smile on their face.
And I know the new manager's slightly changed things in that you don't sleep in the hotel the night before games now, you stay at home. I'm guessing it was a spare room last night.
Yeah, for sure. I was in a spare room, but at the same time, she's a little dream as well, she's just away, she just wants to feed and change it and then she's back asleep. So, I could have stayed in the main room, I would have been fine, but I just thought, it's wise that I stay in the spare room and, I was wide awake and I had energy.
I tell you what, you're making the rest of us look bad. Dads shouldn't have that much energy, especially new ones.
I'm sorry, dads around the world.
Well played, mate. Player of the match, well deserved.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
One for your little girl.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, Curtis.
Lovely. Give it a couple of months though, Curtis, to be fair. I mean, I am listening to that going, 1 week in, generally, Curtis, I can relate to this situation at this very point in time. I will see if he's given chirpy interviews in 2.5 months' time, and let's see how he's going after,
Yeah.
Chelsea are a good team to play when you're full of this energy at the moment. A lot of spaces everywhere.
It's a marathon, Curtis.
Wait till you're trying to unpick Man City or Arsenal and you're sort of, he's a bit cranky. And the footballer's new dad experience. It's funny, Sean Boyd, who plays for Shelbourne, I had a great chat with him recently. He had his first kid this year, and he was like, well, it's the best sleep I've ever had. But that's because, of course, they can go to the spare room. That's the whole thing. It's the great get out of all time.
It sure is.
I have no sympathy, really.
I don't know what Jones's ceiling is. Obviously, he's not a first team guaranteed type, but there's definitely something really there on the basis of yesterday and other performances.
The one thing I would say though is that Chelsea, we enjoy watching Chelsea because there's a basketball style quality to their games.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're someone who's very energetic, who thrives off space, that's a great game for you to look very good. And as I said, maybe it's the more chess-like games that you play. I know I'm not saying he's not a talent. Clearly he is, but I mean, maybe Chelsea, for his attributes, is a great team to be playing against at this point in time.
Can I give a shout out for Romeo Lavia?
Yeah.
You just fall in love with the player. It's a nice thing watching football. I have seen Chelsea live twice this season now, opening day against Manchester City, where I thought they were really good. I didn't understand a sense from some people that they were like outmaneuvered in a big way that day. I thought, God, this is promising. There's a real coherence to them. And I thought on that day, he was absolutely exceptional in possession, playing as a number 6 for a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Exceptional in possession. And then he injured his hamstring and he disappeared for a couple of games, and he was back in the side again yesterday. And again, on the ball, he is doing things that make you go, ooh, that is a level above. That is not normal. So I wasn't too familiar with Lavia. Anderlecht, 8 years of age. He's been in the academy.
Yeah.
And at the age of 15, Kevin De Bruyne called up Pep and said, listen, I do this thing in Belgium, Anderlecht. I have a little tournament. Do you want to come over? And, we'll have a few days together. They obviously have a good relationship. And so Pep came over and he's watching a few different games in the sideline. He's chatting to De Bruyne. And when someone's chatting to you, but their eyes are kind of darting over your shoulder or something. I think De Bruyne had that kind of feeling. So straight away, Pep sees it. Who is that kid? And kid ends up at Manchester City at 16. Fernandinho is his role model. Pep is pretty honest with him about first team opportunities. So he goes to Southampton at 18 for 12 million. And again, I'm not watching Southampton every week because life's too short. I don't have time to watch 90 minutes of Southampton. And he's not the type of player that's going to stick out necessarily on highlights. But he does stick out, and hence Chelsea and Liverpool are after him. Chelsea sign him for 60 million. City get 20% sign-on bonus as well of that. So last year was his first year at Chelsea. It's Pochettino's year. He has terrible luck with injuries, and it's complete chaos at Chelsea. Anyway, I mean, I'd say with the 55 players in the dressing room, it was hard for Poch to notice the 19-year-old kid. But this year, that City performance, this Liverpool performance, there is really something very, very good there. So Romeo Lavia, if he can avoid injuries, it's slightly worrying that last year was injury ravaged and he injured himself on the opening day against Manchester City. So let's see how his body is. But
Talent.
Love.
Because I would have been probably aware of him from the fact that when Gavin Bazunu went from City to Southampton as well, and that's why I was just sort of refreshing my mind there, because there was a buyback clause.
There was,
and City have one with Bazunu as well. That gives you a degree of control, but I think it was a buyback clause of a certain amount, and then once it went above that,
it was 40 million.
Yeah, so once it goes above that, then you head into a different territory. But it is sort of extraordinary if you think about it, that you're talking about Chelsea there, and you've got Cole Palmer and you've got Lavia, who again, it's a couple of City academy kids, albeit one, he came from Anderlecht, he came later. It just reflects the unusual financial landscape now that you have like these potentially, marquee players at one club that have been allowed to leave another one because of these sort of strange financial times we're in. And like you see De Bruyne, obviously he was at Chelsea and was allowed to leave in slightly different circumstances, and now as a generational sort of Man City player, maybe Chelsea are going to get a good decade or so out of those lads.
Wow, I suspect they may. He's on a 7-year deal for whatever that's worth, but Lavia has been so impressive in just 2 games this season, 20 years of age. Just before we get to Gary, we'll chat to him about that game, the Manchester United game, and one or two other things. Evan Ferguson, Brighton are 5th in the table, 1 defeat so far this season. They won at St James's Park. Danny Welbeck's in awesome form. Danny Welbeck's too likeable a type to wish injury upon him for the benefit of Evan Ferguson. No one's doing that, I don't think.
Well, speak for yourself on that one.
You got the voodoo doll under the table.
Well, unfortunately, then he does get injured.
Hopefully
he's okay.
Well, the news seems to be good, thankfully, because it looked really worrying for Danny Welbeck. It was in the 77th minute, late on. He scores the winning goal, by the way, earlier on in the first half. And it's a kind of nothing clash with Fabian Schär, but he collapsed and he's treated on the pitch for several minutes. He's given oxygen. It's a lower back injury. You're thinking, oh my God, has a kind of nondescript collision resulted in something terrible here for Danny Welbeck? But he has revealed scans have taken place and he hopes to train this week.
Yeah, no, to be fair, it's easier to joke about it now when you know that he's actually okay. But I think, Welbeck, the one thing is, I always think how effective and how good Welbeck is for a club like Brighton, and I say a club like Brighton are a top half club, does show you sometimes how good those guys at the elite clubs are, that when they just drop down a tier in terms of level, you just realise, well, actually, that's what got them there. in the first place. But I think for Evan, the fact that they were able to start together anyway is significant. It's his first start of the season. Clearly the international break was good for him in terms of minutes. It's probably a rare example where a club have probably welcomed the international break, and I would presume at Welbeck they're not going to take too many chances now. So maybe for Evan it'll lead to a couple of games.
Okay, here's hoping. Happy to say Gary Breen is back with us. Gary, hello.
Hello.
Let me hit you with one quickly here.
Go on.
So, Exhibit A is Jordan Ayew's winner for Leicester, not marked on the edge of the area from a corner. Exhibit B is Bournemouth against Arsenal. Now, it's a lovely little move, near post, low ball. Clivert flicks it back to edge of area, and some Bournemouth players are blocking Arsenal defenders getting out. But still, Ryan Christie on the edge of the area is not marked at any stage. And I'm kind of thinking, under 11s, somebody's shouting on from the sideline, mark the kid on the edge of the area. What insanity is this? What am I missing?
Oh, do you know what? It drives me mad in terms, but the key element to those situations, and certainly you think about the Christie one is against 10 men. You think about United conceding a goal when they're down to 10 men from a corner. And then you think about Ayew as well, the edge of the box. And it's literally just as if these players are told where they're supposed to stand in every instance in these type of set pieces against. But if there's anything that's different, they just can't problem solve themselves. It's incredible that they have their hand held so much. And any time you'll see it, Joe, you'll see that if there's any little bit of confusion on a set piece, notably a corner or something, you'll see so often, week in, week out, you'll see the players looking from the penalty box over to the dugout to say, he's not running where you told me he's going to be. What should I do? And you're thinking, can you please just take charge of the situation? And I keep saying this about these players, so talented, have every bit of information being given to them, but so lacking in that ability just to problem solve themselves. I was furious. I was actually doing a commentary for the United game. I've got no vested interest in Manchester United whatsoever, but I was so angry with them conceding that goal just before half time. The lit goes off. He's in that 6-yard zone, and he's their biggest, most physical presence in there. He goes off to have that head injury fixed. And not one of those United players thinks to go and stand in that key area. Not even Johnny Evans, who's I've got so much respect for him in terms of his career, his longevity. And he doesn't even problem solve it to the extent where he just takes a little bit of a push from Damsgaard and goes down to try and buy the free kick instead of his mindset being, I'm just going to go and head that ball. And it's so infuriating at times when you're watching.
Strange. Okay, interesting. I was hoping for a better explanation there, but if that's your sense of it, that's actually not great. It's amazing. Yeah.
It is incredible. You see it all the time. There's that inability to just look around and assess what's happening. Now you'll have key kind of characters in your team, whether it's a goalkeeper, your Grizzly centre half, whatever it is. It could be anyone on the pitch, but they'll have to look around, and it must be their responsibility to kind of try and assess what's happening. And you're right. I'd look up at that scenario and think, well, Christie, one of the best technical players in Bournemouth's team, he's on the edge of the box on his own. This doesn't feel right. This just does not feel right. And you'd move someone in and around so if the ball does break to him. But having said that, Joe, when that corner was taken, I was just literally applauding, thinking, that is brilliant. The ball, first of all, to be that low on the delivery, the flick round the corner by Clivert, and then him to step onto that ball, left foot is finished. I mean, that was a joy. That is probably one of my favourite goals this season already.
It was quality. So we won't get through everything. We'll get through what we can. I thought it was kind of striking, by the way, just an Arsenal who can't really afford to lose ground to Man City, such is the nature of the league. You almost feel they need to be ahead coming around the final corner. So Mikel Arteta said of Saliba's sending off on 30 minutes, that from that point on it was an impossible task.
Yeah.
I didn't get the memo on this. When did it become an impossible task against Bournemouth? Whatever against City, he'll just keep the ball forever, maybe with an extra man, and it's really difficult. But Arsenal versus Bournemouth at 0-0, I don't know if I'd frame it as impossible task.
No, and I think there's actually a lot to look behind the scenes in terms of what he said there, because ultimately it wasn't just that one player got sent off, it was that Saliba got sent off. Now, if you think about that brilliant back-to-the-wall performance to see out the result at City, and likewise at home to Brighton when Rice got sent off, it's who gets sent off. Ultimately, it's about, and Saliba is a massive loss to Arsenal. He has been, you think about 2 seasons ago when the title challenge just collapsed when he wasn't there. I think this will be a massive loss for Arsenal in terms of what he gives them, because he gives them that presence. And you can think about key performers that for any of the great teams, if they were to come out of the team, think about Roy Keane coming out of that United team, they weren't quite the same, and yet they had world-class players all over the pitch. So it is interesting. I think the recruitment now suggests, with the likes of Timber coming in this season, I know he's been there a year, but he had that injury, so he's there as an extra defender, Calafiori as well. So I think Arteta will be looking at this and thinking, right, I've got players of quality now to come in. He didn't have that on Saturday because Kivior comes in, and I don't think he's at that level in terms of being able to have that physical presence back there. But it'll be interesting to see how they cope without him, and notably Gabriel, who's been so impressive for Arsenal. But when he hasn't got Saliba alongside him, and that is the concern, is that in that game, Bournemouth opened up Arsenal at will. And that will be the real worry, is that it's not necessarily that you're down to 10 men, it's who that man and what that player means to your team when he gets sent off.
Okay. I'll come back to United in a second, and Liverpool, Chelsea. Just on City's win, given Arsenal's loss, it felt particularly significant. So Bernardo Silva has a little kind of scooch into Jose Sa, and Chris Kavanagh.
That's a good way of describing it.
Chris Kavanagh deems he had just vacated the area just in time that once header goes to Stones, you're not actually interfering anymore. So Gary O'Neill's asked about this, and he's talking about the bias that the big teams tend to get. There's no chance, he says, that people are purposely against Wolves. I am not saying that, he says, just to avoid full paranoia. But is there something subconscious around decision-making that without even knowing it, you are more likely to give it to City than Wolves? My focus and my senses are heightened when I'm facing Man City and Pep and Erling Haaland. Are officials not the same when it's Haaland and when it's City? Is there something there that influences decision-making? They are human. I might be miles off, but if I had to upset someone in a street and there was a little guy and a big guy, I'm upsetting a little guy, and that's nothing against little guys. You would have had the experience of playing in hundreds of professional matches and getting a feel for referees and how it tends to go. This is always a complicated question because, you know, in the main, you're going to be under more pressure against bigger teams, and you're more likely, therefore, to give away frees and give away penalties. And it's sometimes hard to differentiate, well, what's a referee affecting a flow and what's the better team affecting a flow. But did you feel on days at Old Trafford and Anfield and big teams that there was an extra something with the referees?
Well, at Old Trafford, United didn't really need the referees' help to get the better of my teams, unfortunately. But I certainly do remember, not necessarily say decisions, but what you did sense when I was playing back then was the referees, how they would converse with the bigger teams. Like it'll be like, "Oh, Bex, be careful there," or "Roy, no, Roy." And then, do you remember that scene where there's about 10 United players chasing that referee?
Andy D'Urso.
And they're like bullying, and they're like spitting as they're talking to him, and he's like, "Calm down, lads, calm down." And then the next tackle that comes in from the opposition player, he literally gets up and goes, "Ref," and he went, "Book, you're booked. Don't talk to me like that." And it was that type of scenario that you would feel that a lot of referees liked, kind of like being on first name terms with some of those big stars. And I felt at times that he got affected by that. And if I was invariably captain of the visiting team, I'd be saying to the ref, come on, listen, they're not your mates. Don't try and be their mates. You know what I mean? Just give the decisions. But I think ultimately it feels that way. Gary O'Neill's literally walked, I don't know what he was saying, where he was going with it all, saying, listen, I've got nothing against little guys and all this. And I'm not saying anything, but I am actually saying something. And I'm not saying they're all very honest, but subconsciously, and you're thinking, I don't know where he's going with it. But I can understand the frustration, because if you look back even last year, they've had some terrible decisions go against them. But that wasn't one. That absolutely wasn't one. And the skill set of scenarios like that was what Silva does, is that he messes the goalkeeper about. And I know there's been a new change of rule that you can't do it, but it's how quickly you detach from the goalkeeper. Now, if we're marking at corners and stuff, I have no problems with grappling. I would be holding on to people all the time. But you've got to learn when to let go so it doesn't look so obvious. And it's all about timing. Silva got it done perfectly. He wasn't impeding the goalkeeper in terms of his sight. They just didn't defend the corner well enough, and they got punished.
And so if Bex was Bex, were you Gaz, no?
No, I was just probably Breen or something. That was it. Or shut up, you. Probably that one, yeah.
I dare say Gary O'Neill's right. It's a tricky situation. But I agree with you. I don't think it was the wrong decision in yesterday's instance. So we mentioned you did the Manchester United game on Premier Sports on the Saturday. First half, that was starting to feel like an increasingly familiar day.
Listen, it does, and it's so at times. It's saying to you there, it's so difficult to commentate on Manchester United at the moment because you feel like you're just repeating yourself that certain scenarios are happening. And going into the game, it was a big one. Bearing in mind Brentford had played particularly well the week before, I'd identified in my mind that their midfield three had real energy, especially with their captain Damsgaard coming back into there. And then the team sheet comes in and they've gone Casemiro, Eriksen, and Bruno for all their skill sets. They lack athleticism. And at times they did find it difficult in that first half. Brentford played okay. I fully expected Brentford to come out in the second half and chase the result. But even as Thomas Frank said, they were so poor, Brentford, in the second half. And that's not to take credit away from United because they came out of the blocks with that fantastic goal from Garnacho, who was so impressive on the day. And it does kind of like open up the line of, or the chain of thought is that if Garnacho is going to play in that preferred left-hand side position, and Rashford will get pushed out to the right, where he doesn't operate as well. I know he put in a brilliant cross for that goal, and there were moments, but I gave a lot of character in terms of United coming out in that second half, bearing in mind the pressure that would have been on the manager. It had been so intense had they lost that home game. But you just feel that with every time they kind of make one step forward, they're going to make two back. And I think it's a massive challenge for him again up against Jose Mourinho's Fenerbahce team on Thursday evening. And this is the problem we have with United, is that I don't think any of those Manchester United players, you've got to be a very good player to be signed by Manchester United, but you've got to be a brilliant one to stay there because you have to be consistently brilliant. And I don't think enough of them players are. And that is the problem that the manager will always have, is that, you know, one week they'll be good and there'll be moments of individual brilliance that won them the game on Saturday. And it was great to see Højlund get his goal because I genuinely believe that if he got service, and we talked about Bex and Ryan Giggs on the other side, when you're playing up against that United team, crosses and balls and were coming in all the time from Scholes, from behind, from Keane, constant service into those brilliant centre forwards that United have. He doesn't get anywhere near that because the wingers like Garnacho, Rashford and Bruno, all they're interested in is shooting on goal themselves.
Well, speaking of shooting, Bruno, I was just checking stats out of interest.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So that COVID season where he was really phenomenal, he scored 18 goals that year in the league. But since then, it's kind of an 8 goals, 10 goals territory, give or take. This season so far, 8 games, no goals, 23 shots.
Yeah, the most in the Premier League. It's remarkable because, and it's something that kind of extended a little bit to the Portuguese team. Scotland got that brilliant 0-0 result. But Bruno was getting into positions and he was getting his strikes off and it just wasn't happening. And Joe, do you remember when he actually first came, Bruno Fernandes? It was incredible. I think it was something like 40 goals in his first 80 games. And straight away the comparisons are, oh God, he's better than Scholes. He must be better than Scholes. And I don't think anything, that kind of goal return is sustainable. It can't be, but it's been a real drop off for him, and you can hear his frustrations. He don't shy away from it. He literally says, "It's my responsibility to score the goals for Manchester United, and I'm not doing it." So I just find it remarkable that it has lasted as long as it has.
For people who didn't see the game, Martinez filled in at left back. Evans, you know, and again, even just the Evans thing. Okay, he has a good game, so now he's starting. It's this kind of endlessly swapping around for the right kind of jigsaw puzzle pieces. So he was in. De Ligt was with him. Now, De Ligt had a bad moment a couple of weeks ago for the Van de Ven run against Spurs. Lots of defenders like yourself would have felt he was in a bad starting position and didn't react well enough. And there was kind of a, well, let's see where this guy's at. Generally,
I've got a theory on that though, Joe, in terms of that, because Van de Ven runs the length of the pitch and we're all looking at him thinking, come over and fill the gap. But I've been watching United recently now, and defenders don't leave their zones.
Okay.
If it's my channel on there, they stay there and they literally are saying to their teammate, that's your problem, you deal with it. And I genuinely think that's coming from Ten Hag. I believe that. I'm noticing it, that people are not leaving their slots to cover.
Right.
And I think that's an extension from coming from the Eredivisie, where you're manager of the best team, Ajax, and it's kind of like playing lesser oppositions where you think they're not going to punish you, but they do punish you in the Premier League. And I generally am looking at thinking, they're being told to do this, these defenders.
Right, interesting. Well, that maybe explains that moment a bit more in his favour. But generally considered to have been pretty good at the weekend.
Yeah, he was. And I think he kind of enjoyed the kind of physical battle that Brentford would normally ask of you. And Mbeumo, who's been fantastic for Brentford, wasn't particularly good at the weekend. I'm not sure why. I wouldn't necessarily say it was because of Martinez playing at left back against him. He just had one of those games where nothing was coming off for him. Sharda was at the point who's so quick normally, but just wasn't running past De Ligt. Normally you would have feared for him, but he defended really well, actually. Got his body there. It was the type of game he enjoyed. And I think my kind of initial observation, because I'd have seen him a lot in his development. I'd seen him come into the team as a young kid at Ajax, and I'd have been covering a lot of Eredivisie games at the time. And I could see his skill set, but I did often wonder, in terms of where he would go. I felt the move to Juventus would be a good one because it's a particularly slower game there. And of course, then he goes to Bayern Munich, doesn't quite work out like it didn't in Italy for him. And then suddenly he comes to United and you're thinking, is this a big upgrade on Maguire? I'm not convinced, but he is showing a little bit of an improvement now, because ultimately we're not judging him by any other standards. If you go to Manchester United, usually you're considered to be one of the best around, or maybe because of their reduced status, that bar has dropped a little bit, but it's not one of those signings that I immediately thought, oh, wow, that's exactly what they need. And it was the type of signing where I thought, oh, hold on a minute, you've got this new hierarchy at United. They're supposed to be transfer gurus in terms of Dan Ashworth and all these type of guys, Wilcox, in terms of making sure they buy the right players. And yet it was another player, another former player of Ten Hag's, which of that 600 million he spent, I think it's something like 40% of those players have played under him. And I'm not convinced, that having seen Eredivisie as much as I have, that there's many players who can come out of that league and succeed in the Premier League.
And just the last one on that game, how did Nathan Collins go, Gary?
Yeah, he was good. Couple of examples where he was faced up in the box by Rashford, and he worked his body well, got the block on. He looked far more comfortable in that Brentford shirt than he possibly has done. Well, not necessarily that second game for Ireland, but certainly that first one than he has done. I think that's probably because that's a well-drilled team. They know exactly what they're doing. They didn't perform to their usual levels, Brentford at the weekend, to their manager's frustration. But I think as a centre-half, if you know that the team knows exactly what each one's role is, you can perform far better. And I think he's still learning that with Ireland in terms of what Heimer's trying to build. Okay.
Anfield yesterday, it was generally framed in some respects as Liverpool have made an excellent start to the season under Slot, and now we've got some tests. Let's see really where they are. Arsenal next week and Chelsea yesterday. So that's test one passed. Like, it was an interesting game in that first 30 minutes, Andy Robertson was having a difficult time against Madueke. Chelsea seemed to settle very well, very nice on the eye in possession. Lavia in midfield looks like a lovely player, and it was like, oh right, this is a game. And then goal happens. Chelsea do equalise. Second goal happens almost straight away, and they kind of managed it out very well. Liverpool. You wouldn't say it was an awesome performance, but against very decent opposition, there was nothing wrong with it either. Would that be right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when you think of an awesome performance, you immediately think of a Jurgen Klopp performance, Liverpool team, and this was functional. It was controlled. Didn't get overly embarrassed by the fact that Chelsea were having a lot of ball as the away team. They had a way of playing, and I've been so impressed with Slot. And we're talking about the pressures that Ten Hag's under, but ultimately, what Dutch managers, they're so famous across the world, but they've really struggled. There haven't been many who've done particularly well in the Premier League for all their success elsewhere. But I think he's going to do well. I know he has started brilliantly, and everyone's saying it's still very early days, but there's something about him in terms of his personality, in terms of the fact that he's looked at the scenario at Liverpool and not necessarily said, listen, buy me this player, buy me that player. He's looked at the players he's got and thought, I've inherited a brilliant squad here. I'm happy with it. And then you see the emergence of the likes of Curtis Jones yesterday in terms of how influential he was, given the fact that he had the remit of looking after Palmer, who's the most talked about player at the moment, dealt Amp well, and then was such a threat going forward, got one penalty, possibly should have had two, got the goal. So impressive. And then behind him, or dovetailing with him, Gravenberch as well, where we initially thought last year, well, what is he? Can he play that sixth role? Can he play on the half turn? Well, he certainly can play on the half turn in this way of playing. I've been so impressed with him. And it is, you have to kind of give yourself constant reminders to say, let a player play regularly, and the trajectory of his form then will be massive. And we've seen that with him. And if you think about that Slot in terms of what he's doing, there's just an understanding sometimes, well, most of the time with Dutch managers, I know it's a stereotype, but it's their way or the highway. But he's just sitting back, and he's got that. He reminds me a little bit of Gus Hiddink in terms of how well he did at Chelsea, and of course Martin Jol as well at Tottenham and Fulham. That they had an understanding of what the Premier League is about. This manager seems to have learned very quickly.
Yeah, it's so interesting that, because on paper there are Liverpool players that you just know would get chewed up with other clubs. So take Take Jones. Like look at Ugarte at United. Thrown in for a game, thrown to the Wolves, taken out, confident shot. Casemiro goes back in. In another 2 weeks, Casemiro will have a disaster. Then it'll be like, right, Ugarte, back you go in. He'll have another nightmare, or maybe 2-3 games, okay, nightmare, back out. And give it 2 years' time, he'll be turfed out of the club and people will say he wasn't very good. But I suspect if he went to Liverpool, they'd find a way to nurse him and get the best out of him. And it's a remarkably well-run club on that front at the moment.
No, it is. I totally agree with what you say there, because I was having Dave McIntyre was on a commentary with me, and he was saying we were having this argument before we went on air about the likes of Jones and stuff, and how many teams would he get in? But I'll tell you what, he's got a real opportunity now, and this may well change Slot's mind in terms of thinking, does he need that to find that extra midfielder that he was looking for in the summer? The emergence of Jones and of course, there's a lot of pressure on a young player like that to go from being a good young player in the squad at Liverpool to being someone who really nails down one of those starting 11 positions. But he was so impressive yesterday in terms of what he gave them, the energy. And even his interview afterwards, he was saying, when you play centre midfield for Liverpool now, I've got to do my defensive work, which he did. I mean, there was an unbelievable challenge in the box on Palmer to stop a certain goal. Yeah. He said, but then you've got to get forward and help. And you're thinking, and it was interesting because you're thinking, that's what centre midfielders used to always do, and maybe he's a throwback to that, but it's so impressive. It's so sorry, Joe. And they're not the only one. You always look at a manager in terms of can you make the players that you inherit better. Kanate looks so much better as well at centre back. Right. It's not a criticism of Klopp, but it's just showing you what this manager's doing. I've been so impressed with him.
Sorry to jump in there. It's so interesting what you're saying, because just before you came on, I was talking about Jones, and so he runs in behind to win the penalty. He runs in behind for the goal, and just because it was Liverpool, I just thought, and you would have an experience of it, like someone like Steven Gerrard, and not everybody had his power and his athleticism, but I mean, he would just break games up just by saying, I'm going to run in behind the defence 15 times today. And that it's a gift if a midfielder can do it. Obviously, the physical demands to do it are phenomenal, but you're right, you don't see it very often.
No, and you're talking about probably one of the most iconic Liverpool midfielders, but another one who was so successful at Liverpool and played with me at Coventry, Gary McAllister, the same. Could do that kind of break-up role in front of but then burst forward or run in behind the centre forward, dovetail brilliantly with Robbie Keane when they were both playing together with me at Coventry. And then he goes to Liverpool, and it is so impressive as well. I don't know what he was at the time, he's probably nearly 40 years of age, but it just shows you it's not necessarily about energy and stuff like that. It's about that desire to run and to read the game. And he was very impressive.
Because for you as a defender, I know Reece James maybe tried to play offside instead of going with the run, which in hindsight he might have done. But for you as a defender, when that late run from Jones comes and you're on your heels for just because you've no momentum, if he times that late run like that, you're dead. Like you can't do anything really.
No, that's the thing. We've had this conversation so often, about pace is overrated, but it's about timing. It's ultimately about that. Is that if you give someone who could be way slower than you as a runner, if you give him a head start, you're not really going to catch him up, and that's what it's about. The timings of the runs, and I don't know. I just look at Liverpool, and I know everyone said it was a nice kind of fixture list for him to begin with, and of course that shock result at home to Forest where they lost. We covered that game on Premier Sports, and you suddenly thought, this could be a tricky one for you now. The mood may well turn. But the response since then has been brilliant. I mean, they destroyed Milan in the Champions League, but I've been really impressed with them, and that will be a really interesting game now up against Arsenal next week.
Yeah, minus Saliba, of course, as well, which is interesting. Chelsea, Gary?
Yeah, no, it's weird because you often at the beginning of the season, you may well cover a lot of teams, and as we were both saying prior to this, I hadn't seen that much of Chelsea. And I've got all my neighbours where I live, all Chelsea, and they're like telling me this. And you're obviously seeing from something looking from afar in terms of the chaotic nature of that transfer policy and the players that are leaving to replaced by other ones. But in terms of how they've done, I've been impressed with their manager, what he's done. He's led with real authority, and he's made decisions, and certain players are coming in and going out, and not scared to make big changes in terms of like get him off, get the next guys on. So it remains to be seen whether or not they can force their way into that top four.
Just one before you go, I feel in a sense, sorry, I don't. If I frame this wrongly, it's going to sound ridiculous. Everybody obviously knows that Robert Lewandowski is an extraordinary player. One of the great strikers of the last 20 years. He's 36 now. Just at the weekend for Barcelona, he scored, and that meant he's now third outright on the all-time list of goal scorers in Europe's Big Five leagues. So he's third on the all-time list. Obviously, Ronaldo and Messi are ahead of him. So in some respects, this guy should have won a Ballon d'Or once, if not twice. The 2020 edition was cancelled. Messi got it in 21 in the same year that he had scored 41 goals in a league season, Lewandowski. Top Bundesliga scorer 7 times. Only him and Gerd Muller have managed that. And yet, I don't know. I think if you said to people, name the great forward attacking players of the last 20 years, they'd get to him eventually. But I don't know, is that like I can't help but think 300 of your goals came in the Bundesliga. And I'm not saying the Bundesliga is terrible, but like Harry Kane's just scored his 6th hat-trick. I don't know, Lewandowski. I'm not even sure what the question is, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's strange. I think anyone who's listening will probably agree with you. I think as soon as you see the numbers and the stats, he instantly gets your respect and stuff like that. But if you think about a Lewandowski goal, you don't think about him dropping a shoulder, beating 2 players, like running in behind. You know, you just think of him more as a throwback to that really quintessential number 9 where ball comes in the box, he just finishes, one-touch goal. And of course, we do look on the other leagues as such. And, you know, if he's playing, he got a lot of goals at Dortmund, but if he's playing for the powerhouses in the German league, you know that he's going to create so many chances and he's going to score them, as Harry Kane's proving now. But I think probably the main one is that you never seem to feel that he has a massive tournament with his national team. Yeah. I know he's an iconic player for them, but you know, like even with Ronaldo leading his Portugal team to that European title and Messi World Cup and things like that. And
there's a moment.
There's that one moment at international level, which, listen, you're not ever like dismissing what he's done. But I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't like to play against him.
This is the thing. He's awesome. Like he's sitting at home right now, going, "Listen to you, pair of absolute, you know what?
I know. Exactly.
I've scored over 80 goals for Poland."
Yeah, but it's the company we're judging him because you're talking about the two greatest players we've ever seen, Messi and Ronaldo, and he's just tucked in behind them. No shame in that. He's a wonderful centre forward, and what he's doing was incredible. More than anything, is the longevity that he's playing at this age and at this level still. Scoring goals. He's a brilliant player.
Yeah, and yet again, I think you ask people, give me the top 5 of the last 20 years. I'd say a lot of people forget about him. Maybe it's a kind of Anglo football focus as well. Brilliant stuff. We'll talk next week. Gary Breen, thanks a mil.
Thanks, Joe. Good luck, mate.
Gary Breen there. Dan McDonnell still with us. In your mind's eye, Dan, touched on it there with Gary, Robert Lewandowski, 36 years of age, has become 3rd all-time on the list of goal scorers in Europe's Big Five leagues. So he's on 365 goals in the Big Five leagues for his career. 74 at Dortmund, Barca, 54 goals and counting. And then Bayern, it's extraordinary really, 253 games, 238 goals. So he's 3rd on the all-time list. Messi and Ronaldo obviously a little bit ahead of him, just over 100 goals ahead of him. By the way, I hadn't realised this. So who do you think's in second between Messi and Ronaldo? All-time Big Five leagues, goals scored.
Between Messi and Ronaldo? Oh, you've sprung that at me now.
Who's a better goal scorer?
Between Messi and... Go on, tell me, Joe.
Dan, there's no shame in guessing wrong.
But
just guess.
Over what time frame? Sorry.
Their entire careers.
Across the Big Five leagues.
Yeah, that's what Lewandowski is now 3rd in. Across his entire career, Big Five leagues, he's on 365.
So what's the question? Who's second?
And I guess by process of elimination, who's first as well?
The way you asked that question, I think there was someone in between. No. And Lewandowski was 4th. I was looking at your sums.
Sorry.
I was like, who is it? The other Ronaldo? Like, who is it? Shearer? I don't know. Like,
Henry? No, I'm asking between Messi and Ronaldo, who's 1 and who's 2?
I don't know. Maybe Ronaldo's top.
Messi's top.
Is he really?
By the grand total of, this sums up Ronaldo's life, by the grand total of 1 goal.
Oh, no.
In their entire careers, Messi in the Big Five leagues. I couldn't believe this.
It's
last
not
night
done
myself.
yet, though.
But the Big Five leagues.
Yeah, but look, someone will take Ronaldo back for 6 months at some stage.
Maybe.
Surely this will happen to get across this. I rule nothing out in that respect.
Messi's on 496, and it's Ronaldo's lot in life to be on 495, which is just wild. On Lewandowski, so like he should have won the Ballon d'Or in 2020. It was cancelled. It was really cruel. Messi, when he won it in 21, said Lewandowski really should have won it last year. He scored 55 goals that year. And then in 2021, when Messi did win it, he was a touch unlucky in that in a single year for Bayern, he scored 62 goals, 41 in a league season goals. Top Bundesliga scorer 7 times. Only him and Gerd Muller have ever managed that. The next closest is like 3. And yeah, you know, he's a phenomenon. And yet I just don't know.
Is this our Anglo-centric? Is this the Anglo-centric view that we can have sometimes?
I presume it must be. I presume I'm looking at his 238 Bundesliga goals. And, you know, at the weekend, Harry Kane just scored his 6th Bayern hat-trick. And I'm kind of thinking, yeah, are they kind of worth 0.9 a goal or 0.8 a goal versus a Premier League goal? Now, look, it's not like La Liga is, you know, Serie A of the 80s either. But I just wonder, I suspect I'm not giving Lewandowski the respect he deserves.
No, well, I think Kane is a good reference point, actually, because you're going to see what his stats are going to end up being. I think with Lewandowski as well. No, it's true. I heard someone say the other day, you know, Messi was the one player the Premier League missed out on, but Lewandowski is another, I suppose, in terms of the top players of the era. And maybe it's like Poland have been in a few tournaments and it's never really ignited for them, and he's been not at his best and he's just been around the edge of that. And sometimes like you might even think of someone like Gareth Bale, like dragging Wales across the line in big international tournament games. And with Lewandowski, Poland have actually been more disappointing than not when they've got to it. So I think that's possibly a part of it as well. But there is no doubt as well, there will be we often just see the world through those English
it's complete bias. I spent 20 minutes last night watching all of his goals on YouTube, and he can score every single type of goal there is. Free kicks, poacher in the box, both balletic and awesomely strong. Like a phenomenon.
The mad thing is that a lot of his attributes like would have made him very suited to the Premier League as well. Like sometimes you might see a player and you think, well, actually their style or something mightn't be suited to it, but he probably was the prototype like that a lot of clubs are looking for and can't find that type of number 9 now.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's 3rd on the all-time list, Big 5 leagues. 2 quick points of business before we go. Ronnie Gibbons is a Republic of Ireland international. She qualified courtesy of her grandparents from Galway and Mayo. She has 38 appearances for Ireland, and she has gone public. She was the captain of Fulham's women's team, and she's waived her anonymity to allege she was sexually assaulted by Mohammed Al-Fayed, the club's now late owner, in the year 2000, when Gibbons would have been just 20 years of age. Forcefully kissed, groped, twice felt trapped in a room by Fayed, who obviously owned Fulham between 1997 and 2013 and has died last year. There's the BBC expose. I kind of hesitate using that word because it now seems this was borderline open secret in certain quarters. And even Fulham staff have said there was a degree of like managing the situation a couple of weeks ago. You know, like let's not have Mohammed alone with female players. You know, there's kind of a weird atmosphere there, it turns out. The Met have confirmed they're investigating 40 new allegations, including rape, sexual assault, stretching back to 79. And there are now another 21 women, I don't know how many incidents, but 21 women reported 05 to 23. So I make that over 60 allegations against Al-Fayed and counting, I suspect. So Gibbons is the first former Fulham footballer to publicly detail allegations. I suspect she's not going to be the last. So it is a horrific situation to unravel there at Fulham and beyond. Before we go, FAI Cup final. Our league champions were beaten 6-1 by Shelbourne. That's not good.
6-1 at half time as well.
It's a disaster. Kieran Kilduff called it a sobering afternoon. He didn't offer anything in the way of excuses. Shelbourne, deserving winners. He said, if we weren't going to win it, I'm happy they did. 9 players under the age of 22 for Athlone yesterday at a time on the pitch. Maybe didn't help things, but 6-0 down, 6-1 half time. He had a tricky week in that there was war of words with Eileen Gleeson. We talked about it on our Friday panel. He had felt that she wasn't very hands-on, wasn't contacting him or other league managers. And she had a sharp riposte in her press conference announcing her squad for this week's game against Georgia, Euro 2025 playoff, where she, you know, if he wants dialogue, pick up the phone, was the summary of what she had to say. But then Kilduff, after losing the game, resigned in the evening. So Athlone Town, league champions now without a manager. Kieran Kilduff has stepped down, and the Eileen Gleeson War Words is still kind of in the ether. So Strange one, all that. What do you
Strange
make
one,
of it?
yeah. It's strange. The departure is unusual. I know Rory said on Friday, he was going to go and work in the men's game. I wasn't sure about that, but I mean, obviously the way it happens now, you would wonder, is there something lined up somewhere? I don't think Athlone is quite a straightforward club to work at. I will say that. But clearly, like I did feel in terms of the dispute last week, I could understand where Kilduff was coming from. I think an important thing to know in terms of the frustration probably that a lot of people involved with the league would feel is that previously there used to be regular meetups for home-based players that have been discontinued over the last period of time, which has created this sort of sense of, well, where do we sit? And that was always a big thing, that the best players in the National League would meet up under the guise of sort of the national team management, and you would feel, and I know I appreciate that the WSL has got a lot bigger, but still the gap still isn't that big. Like Julianne Russell has come, has been an outstanding player for Ireland in the past six months or so, last year or so, and she's playing in the league at the moment. She's just at home, she's having a family, and there's reasons beyond it. But I think there would be a slight fear that it's becoming a little bit too out of sight, out of mind, but it shouldn't be the case. Players will go from the league, and within a couple of months they'll be straight back in the senior squad. So it's not that much of a leap, and it's clearly there seems like there's a communication issue there. Well, Kilduff is not I'd have a lot of time for Kieran as I know him over a long period of time. He's not someone who would be known as someone who would just throw stuff out there to be a controversialist or anything like that. That's not his personality.
Strange though, and we got to go. People have busy lives; they need to go on things. But it's strange in that if this was like a Vera Pauw or another outside manager who had no real regard for the league, I could understand the disgruntlement. I would think Eileen Gleeson is entitled to be saying, "Well, hang on a second. No one's lecturing me about women's football in this country. It's my entire life. You think I'm not aware of the league? Give me a break."
Yeah, that's true. But maybe sometimes people from that background, more is expected of them, and people are more disappointed with them if they feel that they're not getting that attention that those players are. And I think the point is, like, it's very tough for pretty much every player in that league, with the exception of a dozen or so, are amateurs. And player retention is a big issue. And in some cases, if you're winning the league, you're still not a million miles away from operating at a good level, and you need to. I think probably those home-based camps were probably a big thing. And it was something to aim for those players. Maybe. And if that's gone, you feel a little bit.
But is Gleeson not entitled? Sorry, I'm just playing devil.
I appreciate that.
Advocate a touch. Are we holding Kamala Harris to a higher standard than Trump here? So, like Vera Pauw would have been okay. We expect more of Gleeson. Like maybe Gleeson's honest opinion is, I don't see those camps as worthwhile. I'm watching the players. I'm watching the league. If I think someone's good enough, I'll call them into camp. I'm not wasting my time, just to make people feel better.
Yeah, no, and listen, that could well be an opinion. That holds some merit, but I suppose the vibe I pick up from chatting to people around the place the last week, that I don't think people were saying, "Geez, that's a terrible thing that Kieran Kilduff said." That was out of order.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
I think Gleeson might need to manage that situation a little bit then.
Potentially so, yeah.
Pretty good. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it, Don.
No worries.